A forced conversion is the religious conversion or acceptance of a philosophy against the will of the subject, often with the threatened consequence of earthly penalties or harm. These consequences range from job loss and social isolation to incarceration, torture or death. It is a form of religious cleansing. Religion and power. In general, anthropologists have shown that the relationship between religion and politics is complex, especially when viewed over the expanse of human history. While religion and the state have generally different aims, both are concerned with power and order, both use reason and emotion to motivate behavior, and throughout history, leaders of religious and political institutions have cooperated, opposed one another, and attempted to co-opt each other for purposes both noble and base, and have implemented programs with a wide range of driving values, from compassion aimed at alleviating current suffering to brutal change aimed at achieving longer-term goals, for the benefit of narrow groups ranging from small cliques to all of humanity. The relationship is far from simple, but there is no doubt that religion has been used coercively, and has used coercion. Christianity. Early Christianity was a minority religion in the Roman Empire, and the early Christians were themselves persecuted during that time. After Constantine I converted to Christianity, it became the dominant religion in the Roman Empire. Already under the reign of Constantine I, Christian heretics had been persecuted, beginning in the late 4th century AD. Also, the ancient pagan religions were actively suppressed. In the view of many historians, the Constantinian shift turned Christianity from a persecuted religion into one capable and sometimes eager to persecute. There are many examples throughout the history of Christianity. During the Roman Empire, in the Middle Ages, inquisitions in Spain and Goa, forced conversion of indigenous children, and against Hindus. End of Roman Empire. In 392, Emperor Theodosius I decreed that Christianity was the only legal religion of the Roman Empire, and forbidding pagan practices by law. It is our will that all the peoples who are ruled by the administration of our clemency shall practice that religion which the divine Peter the Apostle transmitted to the Romans. The rest, whom we adjudge demented and insane, shall sustain the infamy of heretical dogmas. Their meeting places shall not receive the name of churches, and they shall be smitten first by divine vengeance and secondly by the retribution of our own initiative. Much of the Roman world, however, remained pagan for centuries. Medieval era. During the Saxon Wars, Charlemagne, king of the Franks, forcibly Roman Catholicized the Saxons from their native Germanic paganism by way of warfare and law upon conquest. Examples include the massacre of Verdun in 782, during which Charlemagne reportedly had 4,500 captive Saxons massacred upon rebelling against conversion, and the Capitulation de Partibus Saxoniae, a law imposed on conquered Saxons in 785 which prescribes death to those that refuse to convert to Christianity. Pope Innocent III pronounced in 1201 that even if torture and intimidation had been employed in receiving the sacrament, one nevertheless does receive the impress of Christianity and may be forced to observe the Christian faith as one who expressed a conditional willingness, though, absolutely speaking, he was unwilling. 4. The grace of baptism had been received, and they had been anointed with the sacred oil, and had participated in the body of the Lord. They might properly be forced to hold to the faith which they had accepted perforce, lest the name of the Lord be blasphemed, unless they hold in contempt and consider vile the faith they had joined. Spanish Inquisition. After the end of the Islamic control of Spain, Muslims and Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492 and from Portugal in 1497. After the Reconquista, so-called New Christians were those inhabitants during the Middle Ages and the early modern era who were baptized under coercion and in the face of execution, becoming forced converts from Islam and forced converts from Judaism. Then the Spanish Inquisition targeted primarily forced converts from Judaism who came under suspicion of either continuing to adhere to their old religion or of having fallen back into it. Jewish conversos still resided in Spain and often practiced Judaism cryptically and were suspected by the Old Christians of being crypto-Jews. The Spanish Inquisition generated much wealth and income for the Church and individual inquisitors by confiscating the property of the persecutees or selling them into slavery. The end of the Al-Andalus and the expulsion of the Sephardic Jews from the Iberian Peninsula went hand in hand with the increase of Spanish-Portugal influence in the world, as exemplified in the Christian conquest of the Americas and their aboriginal Indian population. The Ottoman Empire, the Netherlands, and the New World absorbed many of the Jewish refugees. Goa Inquisition. Religious persecution took place by the Portuguese in Goa, India from 16th to the 17th century. The natives of Goa, most of them Hindus, were subjected to severe torture and oppression by the zealous Portuguese rulers and missionaries and forcibly converted to Christianity. In 1567, the campaign of destroying temples in Bardez met with success. At the end of it, 300 Hindu temples were destroyed. Enacting laws, prohibition was laid from December 4, 1567 on rituals of Hindu marriages, sacred thread-wearing and cremation. All the persons above 15 years of age were compelled to listen to Christian preaching, failing which they were punished. In 1583, Hindu temples at Isilnar and Kunkalim were destroyed through army action. The Fathers of the Church forbade the Hindus under terrible penalties the use of their own sacred books, and prevented them from all exercise of their religion. They destroyed their temples, and so harassed and interfered with the people that they abandoned the city in large numbers, refusing to remain any longer in a place where they had no liberty, and were liable to imprisonment, torture and death if they worshipped after their own fashion the gods of their fathers, wrote Filippo Sassati, who was in India from 1578 to 1588. An order was issued in June 1684 for suppressing the Konkani language and making it compulsory to speak the Portuguese language. The law provided for dealing toughly with anyone using the local language. Following that law, all the non-Christian cultural symbols and the books written in local languages were sought to be destroyed. Methods such as repressive laws, demolition of temples and mosques, destruction of holy books, fines and the forcible conversion of orphans were used. Indigenous children. Indigenous peoples colonized by Christians have been subject to forced conversions. Programs to convert children have been common. North America. The government paid religious societies to provide education to Native American children on reservations. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the Bureau of Indian Affairs founded additional American Indian boarding schools based on the assimilation model of the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. Children were usually immersed in European American culture through appearance changes, with haircuts, were forbidden to speak their native languages, and traditional names were replaced by new European American names. The experience of the schools was often harsh, especially for the younger children who were separated from their families. In numerous ways, they were encouraged or forced to abandon their Native American identities and cultures. The number of Native American children in the boarding schools reached a peak in the 1970s, with an estimated enrollment of 60,000 in 1973. Especially through investigations of the later 20th century, there have been many documented cases of sexual, physical and mental abuse occurring at such schools. Since those years, tribal nations have increasingly insisted on community-based schools and have also founded numerous tribally controlled colleges. Community schools have also been supported by the federal government through the BRM legislation. The largest boarding schools have closed. In some cases, reservations or tribes were too small or poor to support independent schools and still wanted an alternative for their children, especially for high school. By 2007, the number of Native American children in boarding schools had declined to 9,500. Australia. The stolen generations were the children of Australian Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander descent who were removed from their families by the Australian federal and state government agencies and church missions, under acts of their respective parliaments. The removals occurred in the period between approximately 1909 and 1969, although in some places children were still being taken until the 1970s. Documentary evidence, such as newspaper articles and reports to parliamentary committees, suggest a range of rationalist motivations evident include child protection, beliefs that given the catastrophic population decline after white contact that Aboriginal people would die out, and a fear of miscegenation by full-blooded Aboriginal people. Hindus in India. The Baptist Church of Tripura is alleged to have supplied the NLFT with arms and financial support and to have encouraged the murder of Hindus, particularly infants, as a means to depopulate the region of all Hindus. In 2009, the Assam Times reported that about 15 armed HMAR militants, members of Myanmar's National Christian Army, tried to force Hindu residents of Bhuvan, Assam to convert to Christianity. A few Christian evangelists in India have been accused of forced conversion of Hindus, and some of them have been for allegedly converting others by force. Judaism. Forced conversions occurred under the Hasmonean Empire. The Idumans were forced to convert to Judaism, either by threats of exile, or threats of death, depending on the source. In Eusebius, Christianity and Judaism. Harold W. Attridge claims that there is reason to think that Josephus' account of the conversion is substantially accurate. He also writes that these were not isolated instances but that forced conversion was a national policy is clear from the fact that Alexander Jannaeus demolished the city of Pella in Moab, because the inhabitants would not agree to adopt the national custom of the Jews. Josephus, Antiquities, 13:15.4. Maurice Sartre has written of the policy of forced Judaization adopted by Hyrcanos, Aristobulus I and Jannaeus, who offered the conquered peoples a choice between expulsion or conversion. William Horbury has written that the evidence is best explained by postulating that an existing small Jewish population in Lower Galilee was massively expanded by the forced conversion in c. 104 BC of their Gentile neighbors in the north. In 2009, the BBC defended a claim that in 524 CE the Yemeni Jewish Himyar tribe, led by King Dunu Washad, offered Christian residents of a village in Saudi Arabia the choice between conversion to Judaism or death, and that 20,000 Christians had then been massacred, stating that the production team spoke to many historians over 18 months, among them Nigel Groom, who was our consultant, and Professor Abdul Rahman Al-Ansari, former professor of archaeology at the King Saud University in Riyadh. Inscriptions documented by Yusuf himself shows the great pride he expressed after massacring more than 22,000 Christians in Zafar and Najran.